While getting updates on Cooper's investigation into the Kessler family, Kevin received a call from Olivia Rafferty, who told him that her father wanted to see him. Kevin immediately went to the Rafferty family's mansion, where he was stopped by 4 bodyguards who assumed that he was only looking for trouble. Despite Kevin's efforts to explain the situation and ease the tension, the bodyguards attacked, leaving him no choice but to deal with them. Kevin overpowered them just as Olivia came to the door. Olivia could sense that something was wrong with Kevin's tone. When she noticed the 4 men who slowly stood back up in a sorry state, her face darkened. "Kevin is not only my friend, but an important guest who was invited here today by my father. How dare you disrespect him like this?" Olivia scolded the bodyguards coldly. "Ask the others to stand guard here while you get yourselves cleaned up. This had better not happen again in the future."
Yes, ma'am,"
the 4 of them said as they respectfully lowered their heads, ashamed that this young man had been right to defend himself all along, and humiliated that he had so easily bested them despite being outnumbered 4-1. "I'm so sorry about that. What happened just now is entirely our fault." Olivia was straightforward with her words as she humbly apologized. Kevin didn't say anything. He simply waved it off and smiled. "All right, stop standing over there and come inside. My father is waiting for you in his study." Olivia walked over to Kevin in a friendly manner. She then grabbed his shoulders with both hands and pushed him toward the door. When they entered the study, Michael Rafferty was sitting on the sofa drinking coffee. "Dad, Kevin's here," Olivia said with a smile.
"Mr. Williams, welcome to our home. Please have a seat."
Michael Rafferty stretched out his right hand and made a welcoming gesture. "Mr. Rafferty, may I know why you called me over here today?" Kevin got straight to the point and asked. He knew that a powerful man like Mr. Rafferty would appreciate Kevin's decision to skip the small talk. As the saying goes, one should never visit a place without a reason. Kevin was well aware of Olivia's father's position in Washington, but the two had never interacted before, and it was Mr. Rafferty who had mysteriously called Kevin to his mansion, for reasons that Kevin still didn't understand.
"Mr. Williams, since becoming the champion of the herbalism competition, your name has spread far and wide across the country and beyond. In your generation, those who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you are as rare as a unicorn. Naturally, my family would be quite happy to befriend a young talent like you."
Michael Rafferty uttered those flattering words with an unassuming smile on his face. "Mr. Rafferty, if you have something to say, just say it." Kevin didn't want to play dumb with him, and again, Kevin played on the fact that important men like Mr. Rafferty didn't like to waste time. Getting to the point quickly would be something Rafferty would praise in Kevin surely. Kevin also had learned a thing or two about power brokers like Rafferty since coming to Washington, D.C. He couldn't waste too much time chit-chatting because then he could become distracted and be led into a trap. Michael Rafferty suddenly looked at Olivia and asked her to go to the courtyard to get something for him. As soon as she left, the smile on his face quickly disappeared and became somber.
"I heard that over the course of the herbalism competition, you and my daughter stayed in the same room?"
Michael asked seriously. "That's right. I accidentally ran into Olivia, who had nowhere to go. I invited her to my place with good intentions, but of course, this was all thanks to you." Kevin's words were very deliberate. After hearing his explanation, Michael Rafferty's expression changed a lot when he responded.
"Mr. Williams, regardless of the cause that led to her situation, Olivia is still a woman. The fact that the two of you live together under one roof, don't you want to say something? Now that we're all alone, you would better explain yourself to me."
Kevin's facial expression changed drastically. Of course, he immediately understood what Michael Rafferty was trying to say without stating it outright. He then immediately stood up from his chair and hurriedly explained himself to him. "Mr. Rafferty, please don't misunderstand the situation. It's not what you think it is. Nothing happened between me and Olivia. We're just friends. I am a married man who loves his wife. My affections have never strayed from her in our years of marriage."
Are you really going to deny what you did right in front of me? This matter concerns the reputation of our family, and you should know that we're quite prestigious here in D.C. How can I trust you with just a few words?"
Michael forcefully slapped the table in front of him.
"If words get out about this, what would people think of my family? Wouldn't Olivia become a joke among her peers? How do you think that would go over?"
Such harsh words stunned Kevin. He didn't know what to say because what Michael Rafferty said made too much sense. Even though nothing really happened between Kevin and Olivia, nowadays it was easy for people to make baseless assumptions and spread rumors as soon as they found out that a man and a woman were alone in one room for a certain period of time. From the outside looking in, the optics of their arrangement certainly put them at a disadvantage. So no matter how hard either of them would deny this, no one would believe it. At the end of the day, Olivia was a woman. If people in the outside world knew that she had shared a room with Kevin during the competition, it would definitely have an impact on her reputation. As for Kevin, how would he explain himself to Lily if someone told her about this? He didn't want her to think that he went to Washington, D.C. to have a secret romance. With Dorothy moving out of the Salix Leaf complex, their relationship had already started to improve just before he left, so he couldn't afford to ruin it by being the subject of baseless gossip. Kevin pondered this for a while, before suddenly asking without much confidence, Then what should we do about it?"
"Well, would you consider dating her?"
Michael casually suggested. "That's impossible." Kevin immediately refused. He couldn't believe that Mr. Rafferty hadn't heard what Kevin had said about Lily and his marriage, and he had to assume that Rafferty was choosing to ignore it so that he could rescue Olivia's reputation.
"Is my daughter not good enough for you?"
Michael furrowed his brows. As he surrounded his body with spiritual energy at an extremely fast speed, he looked like he was about to make a move. No, Mr. Rafferty, it's not that at all. Please listen to me. Olivia is a good friend, but I am already happily married," Kevin explained a second time. Michael Rafferty just exhaled and leaned back on the sofa. "Mr. Rafferty, please try to understand." Kevin tried to negotiate his way out of the situation. "I am only friends with Olivia. If this will really have that much of an impact on her reputation, I am willing to offer your family some other form of compensation for it."
"Compensation? Tell me, how can you compensate me?"
Michael told him off righteously. No matter what his plan was, as Olivia Rafferty's father, he felt that he firmly stood on the moral high ground in this matter. After all, his own reputation was tied to hers. For a moment, Kevin didn't know what to say, but he knew that he had to come up with something in order to avoid making an enemy out of the Rafferty family.
"Mr. Williams, don't think you can do whatever you want just because you won the championship at the Herbalist Society's competition. Although the Rafferty family isn't the strongest in Washington, D.C., we're far from being people that can be taken lightly by anyone. If you don't believe me, you can give me a try."
Michael's tone had become extremely fierce when he said this, and Kevin realized that facing down Rafferty's 4 bodyguards was easier than facing down the man himself. At the same time, in the living room of the Swinton family's mansion in St. Louis, Thomas Williams was sitting in a chair with his head lowered. With just moments to spare before he would be face to face with Alan once again, he was thinking carefully about what to say to his older brother, especially since he hadn't been on good terms with him for years. Back then, the rest of the Williams family had put in a lot of effort in order to drive Kevin and his parents away from New York. But now that they had to go through a lot of trouble just to invite them back into the fold, it all felt as if things were about to come full circle, and Thomas didn't know what to make of it. Confronted with the issue of living under one roof with Olivia during the herbalism competition, Kevin told Michael Rafferty that they were just friends. Michael explained that, regardless of whether Kevin was telling the truth, Olivia's reputation would be damaged if rumors were to spread. As Kevin dealt with pressure from Olivia's father, 1,000 miles away in the Swinton family's mansion, Thomas Williams was deep in thought about how to convince his brother Alan to return to the fold after banishing him and his family a few years ago. Alan Williams slowly walked into the living room accompanied by Richard Swinton. Seeing his younger brother, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, Alan opened his mouth and wanted to say something. However, when his mind quickly recalled what had happened between them in the past, his face turned gloomy as he simply walked to a chair and sat down in silence. At the same time, Richard Swinton sat quietly off to the side, with no intention of speaking. Although he and Alan treated each other like brothers, this was obviously a family matter. As an outsider, he felt he had no right to interfere. The atmosphere in the room gradually became tense. After a long time, Thomas Williams broke the silence with a bitter smile.
How have you been, brother?
Huh. Do you really still see me as your brother? Since being banished a few years ago, I am merely just an ordinary civilian now. So how can I bear to be in the presence of the current patriarch of the Williams family? Alan coldly retorted.
Alan, it was my fault that I started this conflict between us in the past. I was blinded by ambition and my wife's words, which caused you and your family to suffer for years. But now that I've finally come to my senses, I sincerely hope that you can return to the family and take your rightful position as our family patriarch.
Thomas offered with a bitter smile. Given their conflict, Thomas did not feel surprised when he saw Alan's cold reaction upon seeing him. Because of this, he took it upon himself to be the first to swallow his pride and extend an olive branch in order to ease the tension between them.
Alan, at the end of the day, we are still brothers. As the saying goes, there should be no bad blood between family members. So I hope you can forgive all the things that I've done to hurt you in the past.
Thomas pleaded with him sincerely. Upon hearing this, Alan wasn't in a hurry to express his stance as he narrowed his eyes at his brother. After a long while, he only managed to let out a slight sigh. Thomas was right. Despite their differences in the past, he was still a member of the Williams family. After all, their family's blood flowed through his veins, and this was a part of him that couldn't be changed no matter what. Seeing his reaction, Thomas initially couldn't understand whether his silence was a good thing or not. Suddenly, a faint smile appeared on his brother's face as Alan walked over to give him a gentle pat on the shoulder. Back in the study of the Rafferty family's mansion in Washington, D.C., Kevin swept his eyes across a group of Rafferty's underlings who had condensed their spiritual energy around their bodies and were clearly ready to fight. Finally, his gaze fell upon Michael Rafferty. Mr. Rafferty, no matter how you try to spin things, nothing is going to change. Besides, your men won't be able to keep me here for long, Kevin remarked with a slight frown. Regarding Olivia's matter, Michael Rafferty had shown an unusually firm attitude. After all, although none of this would have happened if he supported his daughter's participation in the herbalism competition, he refused to acknowledge this and had to make Kevin take full responsibility for it instead.
Huh. You think too highly of yourself. I know that you have a strong power base, but you're also underestimating what I'm capable of doing. Everyone has a weakness, including you. So even if I can't do anything to you today, I have other ways to get what I want. And if I want to deal with an outsider like you, it will be a piece of cake for me.
Michael then revealed a cold smile.
By the way, aren't you currently based in Chicago?
When he heard this, Kevin's pupils instantly shrank, and he clenched his fist tightly. Of course, he wasn't surprised that the Rafferty family had the ability to investigate his background thoroughly. Given this, he knew that Michael Rafferty was planning to use Lily, Emo Squire, and the rest of his close associates in Chicago as leverage against him. They are all ordinary people. As an expert, you should know that attacking them is against the law. Even with your current status, the Rafferty family can't afford to commit this crime, Kevin retorted with a frosty expression.
Is that so? According to my sources, Emo Squire and the others have been enhancing their power bases. Although their level may not be that high, they certainly can no longer be considered ordinary people. As for Lily, she may not have officially started developing her own strength, but as a student of the Healing Arts School, she still counts as a member of the Great Powers. So if I decide to go after them, I don't have to worry about breaking any laws.
Michael was too cunning to be fooled by Kevin. These words almost made Kevin regret some of his decisions in the past. After all, he was the one who introduced Emo Squire and the others to the benefits of taking the power pill. Back then, it was for the sake of them having enough strength to protect themselves. But now, he never thought that it would come back to haunt him and become his biggest weakness. It was as if he had lifted a heavy stone, only to throw it at his own feet. Despite this, Kevin gritted his teeth and remained firm with his stance on the matter. He replied, "As I've already told you, Olivia and I are just friends." Michael paused for a few seconds as if he had just remembered something.
Oh, right. I have something else to tell you. My men have already gone to Chicago to invite Lily to Washington, D.C. When the time comes, I will have a chat with her about all of this.
You have guts, Mr. Rafferty, but let me warn you. If you dare to push forward on this, I will make sure that the Rafferty family will never be at peace for the rest of their lives. Kevin roared with a stern voice, and his eyes looked as if they were on the verge of spurting out flames at him. However, no matter how angry and threatening he was at the moment, Michael Rafferty only glanced back at Kevin indifferently. After that, he simply waved his hand gently and ordered his men to see him out. As soon as he left the Rafferty family's mansion, Kevin immediately dialed Dalton Steele's number.
"What's wrong, Kevin?"
Dalton asked. "Dalton, I just received news that someone is trying to harm Lily, so you have to keep a close eye on her for me from now on. No matter what time of day it is, you cannot let her out of your sight," Kevin instructed him anxiously. "Also, if you have seen Lily recently, tell me everything that's going on with her. Spare no detail."
"Speaking of, it's good that you called. I also wanted to tell you that Thomas Williams came to the Salix Leaf Complex recently to look for your wife. He said that he wanted you guys to return to the Williams family."
Dalton scratched his head. He didn't know how to explain this matter more clearly. Return to the Williams family? What kind of trick is he playing? Kevin immediately frowned and asked,
"How would I know? Anyway, you must be really busy over there, so I won't keep you much longer. Rest assured, I will take care of Lily. Don't worry about it. I may not be able to accompany you to D.C., but I can help ensure that things here are stable,"
Dalton said. He chatted with Kevin for a little while longer before hanging up the phone. As Kevin wandered around the streets downtown, he suddenly felt restless. Had he known that his good intentions toward Olivia would cause such a big mess, then he would never have considered offering her a place to stay that day. Perhaps he should have asked Mason Zimmerman to take her in instead when he had the chance. As for the Williams family, Dalton's revelation didn't bother him much because he no longer regarded Thomas Williams and the rest of his relatives as potential enemies. Just then, Kevin noticed that a man was following him from behind. After finding a quiet place, Kevin suddenly stopped and turned around. "I don't know whether I've offended you somehow, but why are you following me?" "Greetings, Deputy Leader. My name is Landry Sims." The man lowered his head respectfully before Kevin. "Did the Supreme Commander send you here?" Kevin carefully sized this man up and asked. "The Supreme Commander led the Myriad to lead experts to battle against the Alliance's forces. After a few rounds of fighting, our army suffered a great loss. Because of this, the Supreme Commander sent me to look for you, Deputy Leader. He hopes that you can rush over to help the Myriads as soon as possible." Landry Sims spoke bluntly. However, his eyes were filled with complicated emotions as he looked at Kevin. After all, Kevin was the deputy leader, and the difference in status between them was just too far apart. But since the Supreme Commander had sent him specifically to deliver this message, Landry Sims had no choice but to show a brave face as he waited for Kevin's response. But though Landry remained calm and patient on the outside, he had to fight himself inside not to reveal to Kevin that the decision Kevin would make would have a major influence on the outcome of the battle for the Myriads. After finding out that Michael Rafferty sent his men to bring Lily over to Washington, Kevin warned that if he pushed through with this, he would make the Rafferty family regret it. Kevin called Dalton to keep a close eye on Lily, and in turn, Dalton informed Kevin about Thomas Williams' desire to bring Kevin and Lily back into the Williams family. While wandering to process his thoughts, Kevin was accosted by Landry Sims, who revealed that he had been sent by the Supreme Commander, Brett Stewart, who hoped that Kevin would return to help the Myriads in their battle against the Alliance. "I understand. Go back and tell the Supreme Commander that I'll rush over to help the Myriads as soon as I'm done with some matters here in Washington." Kevin stood behind him with one hand behind his back and used his other one to send Landry Sims away. As soon as Sims left, Kevin suddenly thought of something. He then quickly took out his phone and called Spencer.
"What can I do for you today, Mr. Williams?"
Spencer asked respectfully. "Ask the Dixon brothers to bring a few experts with them to Chicago and secretly protect Lily," Kevin ordered.
"Mr. Williams, unfortunately all 7 of them have recently gone into seclusion in order to break through to a level 5 power base,"
Spencer replied in an awkward manner. "How close are they to breaking through?" Kevin's heart instantly became somewhat excited. After all, this could be considered a pleasant surprise. With a few more level 5 experts guarding their headquarters, the Radiance's strength would surely rise to another level.
"Prior to going into seclusion, all of them experienced a bottleneck in their training. As for how long it will take for them to break through, only time will tell, as it will depend on their ability to persevere. Since they are currently unavailable, why don't you let me go and protect your wife instead?"
Spencer volunteered. "There's no need for that. You and Derek have to stay at the Radiance's headquarters for me." Kevin immediately refused. Spencer and Derek had become his trusted subordinates even before the Radiance was established. Given this, while Lily's safety was important, it also hadn't been easy for the Radiance to reach its current scale. With tens of thousands of members depending on him, Kevin naturally couldn't just send all of his elite experts to Chicago. Otherwise, it would leave the Radiance's headquarters too vulnerable to attack, and he could lose everything that he had just built. Ask Cameron and Julia Hill to bring 20 level 3 experts to Chicago. However, tell them that if they encounter a powerful enemy, they shouldn't recklessly confront them head-on. Instead, they must protect Lily at all costs, Kevin instructed. Deep down, Kevin had always hated this kind of situation. When Kevin founded the Radiance, he took out some pills in order to entice people to join. But while there were leaders who believed that they could use their power to dictate what happens to their subordinates, Kevin always felt that their lives were more important than anything else. Because this mission wouldn't guarantee their survival, Kevin felt that everyone had the right to make a choice for themselves. For those who are willing to go to Chicago, give them some good pills as compensation. After Kevin gave these instructions, he immediately hung up the phone. Some of the pills that the Radiance refined were worth at least tens of millions of dollars. So even if something bad were to happen to them, their families could still live a comfortable life with this money. Although doing this wasn't enough to give him a clear conscience, it would at least reduce the guilt in his heart. Back in the hospital where Mario Kessler was, Raymond was watching over his grandson, who was still unconscious and still had gauze wrapped all over his body. The more he thought about Mario's sorry state, the gloomier his face became.
"Dad, I'm back."
David quickly walked in with an equally somber expression.
How did the meeting go? Is the Orion Group still unwilling to let go of this conflict?
Raymond asked coldly. The Kessler Corporation and the Orion Group had found themselves in a stalemate for quite some time. Not wanting this to drag on any further, the Kessler family could no longer afford to sit still anymore. Under Raymond Kessler's instructions, David personally visited the Orion Group to meet with Terry Watford, hoping to end their conflict. Although doing so was said to be mutually beneficial for both parties, the truth was that Raymond was simply getting desperate after the Kessler Corporation had already suffered heavy financial losses. However, based on David's expression, it was clear that their meeting didn't go as planned.
Terry said that the Orion Group will continue to suppress the Kessler Corporation until Kevin tells them to stop.
David let out a long sigh.
That man is too arrogant for his own good.
Raymond sneered as he forcefully slapped the table. David hesitated for a second before asking,
Dad, what should we do next? The company's funds can no longer be used up. If this war continues, we have no choice but to start using our family's savings.
The resources of the Kessler Corporation were not comparable to the Orion Group. In order to keep their businesses afloat, they sold shares to investors that added up to almost 50% of their business. They must have had a shortage of funds in the past. If the company's reserves were fully dried up, it would definitely put them in trouble with their shareholders. However, this didn't mean that the Kessler family themselves were struggling financially. In fact, they had a huge amount of personal savings that was enough to last for at least several more generations. It was just that once that money was taken out, it would definitely attract the attention of the government's higher-ups. And if they found out how all of that wealth had actually been acquired, this would bring them even more trouble.
Let's not worry about our troubles in the future. Instead, we must do everything that we can to stabilize the market first.
Raymond was indeed full of wisdom. He was able to make this decision without any hesitation.
Also, contact the secluded valley and ask them to send as many experts as they can to get rid of Kevin as soon as possible. Don't think about how much it will cost us in the short term. As long as he dies, this conflict will naturally come to an end. At the same time, we'll still be able to take advantage of the opportunity to destroy the Orion Group and reap all the benefits.
He added,
When the time comes, the higher-ups in the government will surely look into it. Hopefully our strength will have risen further by then in order to avoid raising any suspicions from them.
Yes, sir. David immediately turned around and left to take care of things according to his father's orders. In the Williams family's mansion in New York City, the main bedroom was filled with broken pieces of vases and glass. Laura Williams sat on the ground angrily, and her eyes revealed a malicious expression from time to time. Meanwhile, Ethan sat off to the side, not daring to make a sound as he looked at his mother timidly. Thomas Williams had been gone for a few days. He left New York in hopes of convincing Kevin to return to the Williams family. Given this, the two of them knew that once this happened, everything that they had now would disappear. "What are you still sitting there for? Why haven't you thought of something?" Laura looked at her son, who she usually doted on, and scolded him angrily.
If Dad insists on letting that bastard come back into our family, what can I do? Even if I wanted to, it's not like I can get rid of him. He's too strong.
Ethan raised his head as he drank all the wine in his glass in one gulp. "You useless piece of trash! You only know how to spend money on women. Why don't you try to use that brain of yours? If you can't handle Kevin, then why don't you change your target?" Laura shouted loudly. Ethan was stunned when he heard her.
Are you saying that I should go after his wife?" he stammered.
"Well, what are you waiting for?" Laura glared at her son. Seeing the intense look in her eyes, Ethan immediately stood up from his chair and almost tripped on his way out the door. Meanwhile, in the Murphy family's mansion, Donald Murphy was playing chess with Herman Thompson as Kevin sat off to the side. The fight between their black and white chess pieces was very intense, but neither of them could defeat the other. Donald Murphy looked at Kevin and said,
"Kid, don't be so anxious. Currently, the Orion Group has the advantage in this conflict. Besides, isn't the KWTD Corporation also going after them? The Kessler Corporation's days are numbered. They can only resist stubbornly for so long."
Donald reassured Kevin as he took a black chess piece from the chessboard and contemplated his next move. Destroying the Kessler Corporation is only the first part of my plan, but my ultimate goal is to eliminate the entire Kessler family. Given this, it's not that I'm anxious about getting rid of them, but because I have a lot of other things to deal with right now. I have to take care of this matter as soon as possible, Kevin explained impatiently. After he said that, Donald Murphy's hand, which had been holding a chess piece, suddenly trembled. After a few seconds of silence, he raised his head and looked at Kevin with a complicated expression. He then asked,
"Are you really going to eliminate all of the people of the Kessler family? Is there no more room for negotiation on this matter?"
When Donald Murphy reassured that the Kessler Corporation's days were numbered amidst its conflict with both the Orion Group and the KWTD Corporation, Kevin told him that that was just a part of his bigger goal to eliminate the entire Kessler family. While Kevin hoped to take care of this matter swiftly in order to have one less problem to deal with, Donald trembled upon hearing this and asked whether there was really no longer any chance for both sides to reconcile. Donald Murphy's question stunned Kevin. At this point in their conflict, anyone with discerning eyes could see that the relationship between him and the Kessler family was clearly beyond repair. With both of them unwilling to make peace, they could only fight to the death. However, when Donald Murphy asked this question again today, it left a bad taste in Kevin's mouth. At the same time, Herman Thompson's hand, which was holding a white chess piece, suddenly stopped in midair. As he looked at the chessboard, he frowned slightly, and a complicated expression emerged in his eyes. While squinting his eyes at Donald, Kevin's tone became somewhat cold as he asked, "Mr. Murphy, what do you want me to do? Should I simply let them go and allow myself to be pushed around like this?"
"I'm just saying that it is better to resolve a grudge peacefully than through violence. After all, there was no deep hatred between you and the Kessler family before your conflict started, so there is no need to escalate the matter to such an extent."
Donald put down the black chess piece in his hand and said slowly,
"Kevin, since the root cause of your dispute was just a small matter, wouldn't it be better to resolve this misunderstanding and forgive each other? There's no need to make such a big fuss over it, especially when people's lives are at stake. Do you understand?"
"I understand what you're saying, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with you. In the end, only one of us can survive. Whether you ultimately choose to side with me or with the Kessler family, it's still not too late for you to change your decision." Kevin firmly expressed his stance and added, "Mr. Murphy, you have helped me a lot since my arrival in Washington, D.C., and I am deeply grateful for it. So if you want to withdraw your support for me because of this conflict, I won't hold it against you or the rest of your family." Upon hearing this, Donald just let out a deep sigh and didn't answer. While he didn't necessarily agree with Kevin's words, he didn't refute them either. He had always been kind of ambiguous with his support for Kevin in this particular matter due to his close relationship with Raymond Kessler. Just then, Herman Thompson, who had been silent the entire time, seemed to have thought of something. He then dropped the chess piece in his hand and stood up. After giving Kevin a meaningful look, he quickly walked out the door. After Kevin followed and closed the door, a bitter smile appeared on Donald's face. Not knowing what had just happened, he decided to take this time to reflect on Kevin's words. After leaving the Murphy family's mansion, Herman decided to take a walk along the street as Kevin caught up with him. "What do you think about all of this?" Kevin broke the silence first as he caught up with him. He understood that Herman had invited him for a walk because he had something to tell him in private. "No matter how you look at it, what Donald wants to happen is unrealistic. Kevin, you have to remember that it doesn't matter if it's him or me you're dealing with. At the end of the day, we are all external forces who are looking for our own family's interests and for ways to improve our position in this city. So while it is always good to hear out what other people have to say, you must take everything with a grain of salt and form your own decisions in order for you to become truly supreme." Herman stopped for a second to give him a pat on the shoulder. "You can only go on to achieve greater things once you have fully grasped the power that's in your hands." "I understand what you're saying, Mr. Thompson, but I honestly don't know what my next move should be at the moment," Kevin admitted with a dejected tone. This matter had troubled him for too long. Although Washington, D.C. was prosperous, from the looks of it, it seemed that the city was already packed with influential people who had been entrenched there for many years, leaving no room for an outsider like him to settle down and build his own foundation. If it wasn't for the fact that he felt the need to make a name for himself and stand out as a newcomer, he wouldn't have participated in the Herbalist Society's competition in the first place. But after meeting so many people who offered support and guidance along the way, as well as encountering a few enemies who clearly wanted to eliminate him from the picture, he didn't know which path to take moving forward. "Kevin, you have too many things in your heart that have obscured your vision so much, and I can tell that you're finding it difficult to tell which path is best because of it," Herman calmly explained to Kevin. "Although the path of becoming a powerful expert is far different from becoming an ordinary businessman, the two are inseparable. Given this, I know that your goal in coming to DC is to enter the upper realm. But before that, you'll first have to build a solid foundation by gaining a foothold here in DC." He added, "With several industries being highly competitive and oversaturated, you have to be smart about where to position yourself. As such, in coming up with a way to bring your business here in a way that you can thrive, you can start by asking yourself, what can't ordinary people live without? The most basic necessities include food, clothing, and medicine." Kevin bit his lip and seriously thought about what Herman had said. If he could become a giant in one of these industries, this would allow him to build connections with many influential people. Without a doubt, Herman's words had lifted his spirits and given him some useful advice to work with. "By the way, aren't you a good friend of Olivia Rafferty? I heard that the pharmaceutical industry has 3 main players, and the Rafferty family is one of them. Why don't you see if you can get some useful tips from her?" Herman gave Kevin a deep look. Although he had been staying in the Murphy family's mansion recently, he still knew everything that happened to Kevin. After finding out that he needed to deal with the Rafferty family again, Kevin helplessly shook his head. However, he knew that taking advantage of this shortcut was much better than going in blind, so he contacted Olivia and met her at a cafe 2 hours later. "Kevin, what did you say to my father?" Olivia asked as soon as she sat down. By the time she returned to the study earlier, she only saw Michael Rafferty sitting alone drinking coffee, as Kevin had already disappeared. But when she also asked her father the same question, she did not get a concrete answer from him. Upon hearing this, the corner of Kevin's mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times. How could he possibly tell her that her father threatened to hurt him and the people he cared about in Chicago because of a misunderstanding about the nature of their relationship? "No, nothing. I just shared some of my dreams and goals here in the future." Kevin didn't want to dwell on this topic anymore, so he quickly changed the subject and asked, "Anyway, I heard that the Rafferty family is one of the three giants in the pharmaceutical industry. Since I'm also interested in opening my own pharmaceutical company here in Washington, D.C., can you tell me more about the current situation in the industry?" Hearing Kevin's words, Olivia initially thought that he was joking and couldn't help but burst out in laughter. "I really can't tell whether you're kidding or not. But as a champion of the herbalism competition, you're now an honorary senior member of the Herbalist Society. So if you really want to get into the pharmaceutical industry, I'm sure there will be plenty of companies that will hire you given your credentials," Olivia said, praising his talent. "I'm more interested in creating something of my own," Kevin scratched his head and replied. Olivia didn't expect that the champion of the Herbalist Society's competition would be so interested in setting up his own pharmaceutical company. "All right, then I'll give you a rough idea of where the industry is currently at. Apart from our family's business, the other two giants are run by the Bates and Smart families." Olivia paused for a second before continuing. "Edmund Bates was a senior member of the Herbalist Society in his early years. I don't know why he eventually left the organization, but upon doing so, his own family started to develop all kinds of medicine based on various formulas that could cure diseases and save lives." She then continued, "Meanwhile, the Smart family has been in the industry for generations. Currently, their two heads divide their work. One of them, Jonathan Smart, has dedicated his career to developing cures for life-threatening diseases. On the other hand, Wesley Smart focuses on using ordinary medicinal herbs to treat more common illnesses. Lastly, the Rafferty family's business is a joint effort between my father and one of my uncles, as they also refine pills that can save people." After learning more about the background of these three giants, Kevin slowly bit his lip before asking, "Can you take me to see either the Bates family or the Smart family?" "Why do you have to see them? If you want to learn more about the industry, why don't you just come directly to us? I'm sure you'll be more than satisfied with the medicinal herbs and pills that we have to offer." Olivia instantly tried to entice Kevin, afraid that a special talent like him would be lost to a rival. "Don't misunderstand my intentions. I don't want to rely on anyone's support for my business. I just want to meet them out of curiosity." While Kevin said this, he shuddered at the thought of having to deal with Michael Rafferty again. "In that case, you're in luck. It just so happens that there will be a medicinal herb auction at the Grand Pharmacy building tonight. Almost all of the influential figures from the pharmaceutical industry will be in attendance. I'll take you there later so you can take a look." Olivia immediately volunteered without him even asking. However, Kevin did not notice the excitement on her face. He was too busy thinking about how he would make his mark in the pharmaceutical industry. Since Kevin needed to build a solid foundation in Washington before entering the upper realm, Herman Thompson advised him to establish a business in an area of need, such as pharmaceuticals, where the Raffertys and two other families dominated. Despite his issues with Michael Rafferty, Kevin met with Olivia to learn more about the background of all three families. Olivia revealed that a medicinal herb auction was going to be held later that night. Since many of the pharmaceutical industry's most prominent figures would be attending, Olivia offered to take Kevin to the event. Said to have once been a famous pharmacy that was owned by one of the Smart family's ancestors many years ago, the Grand Pharmacy building had become one of the most iconic buildings in Washington. Given this, all of the pharmaceutical industry's biggest names agreed to hold an auction here every year, not just to sell precious medicinal herbs, but also for the sake of networking with their peers. At the same time, every time the auction was announced to the public, many of the capital's most influential politicians and wealthy businessmen would attend as well. After all, as ordinary people, they did not have the qualifications nor the means to purchase precious pills from the Herbalist Society. Not only was this against the law, but these pills were originally meant for experts, so no matter how beneficial they were intended to be, If people weren't strong enough to handle the potency of these pills, consuming them could actually cause harm. However, it was no secret that humans have always had a desire to increase their strength and extend their lives. This was especially true for those who had yet to fully enjoy the benefits brought by their current power and influence. Because of this, there had never been a lack of people who were willing to spend a lot of money just to buy anything that could enhance their lives in some form. When they arrived at the entrance of the Grand Pharmacy building, Kevin first scanned his surroundings. He found that although the security guards inside all seemed imposing, at most, they could only be considered the strongest among ordinary people. There wasn't even the slightest hint of spiritual energy coming from their bodies. The Grand Pharmacy building is the property of the Smart family. Unlike us, none of their family members have ever gone down the path of becoming an expert. It's precisely because they are completely focused on their research that they are able to achieve so many medical breakthroughs. Olivia seemed to have seen through Kevin's thoughts as she fiddled with her hair and explained this to him in a low voice. For generations, the Smart family has sat firmly at the top of the pharmaceutical industry. But since the Smart family is made up of ordinary people, we in the Bates family can't use forceful means to challenge their position. As expected, Kevin revealed a look of sudden realization. While his knowledge of how to refine medicinal pills made entering the pharmaceutical industry look like an almost seamless transition, it was becoming quite clear to him that it was already very difficult to achieve certain things due to the stiff competition between the three families. So if he still wanted to pursue this career as an expert, he would likely have to overcome many challenges in order to prove himself. There's only about 10 minutes left before the auction begins. We should go inside now so that we can still get some good seats. Olivia took out her entry pass and gave it to the security guard in front of her. However, when Kevin was about to go in, the security guard suddenly stopped him.
Miss Rafferty, the ticket that you gave is only good for one person, so the gentleman who came with you cannot go in unless he has one as well.
The security guard respectfully explained to Olivia. Although he was employed by the Smart family, he couldn't afford to be disrespectful toward someone like Olivia Rafferty. Can't I bring someone in with me? Olivia asked with a slight frown.
I'm afraid that it's against the rules. Please, don't make things difficult for me.
The security guard tried his best to keep her calm. Olivia wanted to respond, but was stopped by Kevin. He's just following orders, Olivia. Cut him some slack. Kevin understood the security guard's situation very well. It was not easy to make an honest living in D.C., so while he had originally come here to find out more about the pharmaceutical industry and the main players behind it, there was no need to make a huge fuss about him not being allowed to enter. All right, just wait here for a moment. I'll go inside first and find someone who can get you a ticket. Olivia could only glare at the security guard before she quickly entered the Grand Pharmacy building. The security guard then looked at Kevin disdainfully from head to toe. In his opinion, Kevin was just a young man who used his good looks and charm to attract someone of Olivia Rafferty's status. Other than that, what was the difference between these two men?
Stand off to the side, please. Don't delay the other guests who are coming in.
He scolded Kevin unhappily. All right. Kevin did not fuss over it too much and obediently stood to the side, making way for the people behind him to enter. The security guard then turned to Kevin and asked in a low voice,
I'm curious, how did you manage to get close to someone like Miss Rafferty?
Kevin almost laughed out loud when he heard this. He now understood that this security guard seemed a little jealous of his closeness with Olivia. But because this man seemed to look down on him, Kevin decided to play along instead of telling the truth.
It's fine if you don't tell me. I wouldn't let you enter this building either way.
The security guard's face darkened and he no longer paid any attention to Kevin. Just then, he suddenly heard a familiar voice.
What the hell? Kevin, what are you doing standing outside with these security guards? It has only been a few days since we last saw each other, so how did you end up in such a miserable state so quickly?
Kevin looked over and saw Kurt Eubanks standing in front of him, accompanied by a beautiful woman on his arms. I'm just waiting for someone here." Kevin rubbed his nose and replied awkwardly.
"Waiting for someone? Are you just hiding the fact that you're working here now? My dad told me that I should learn to be more like you. When I go home tonight, I'll gladly tell him that you're now just a lowly security guard."
Kurt sneered as he arrogantly straightened his back in front of Kevin. "Kurt, who is this person?" the woman beside him asked in a delicate voice.
"He's just an acquaintance."
Kurt looked at Kevin and suddenly sighed. He then pretended to show some concern and uttered,
"Kevin, don't belittle yourself now by settling for a job like this. Don't you know how to refine pills? The Smart family is the leading giant in the pharmaceutical industry. Why don't you apply for a more suitable job in their company instead?" He added, "Listen to me. Washington isn't a place where you can afford to be arrogant, so learn to be humble and slowly work your way up. If you really can't survive, then come and find me. When the time comes, I will definitely make arrangements to help you out." Hearing his words, Kevin remained silent and didn't give him any unnecessary explanation. In his opinion, Kurt Eubanks was just a child who hadn't matured yet. There was no need to get too entangled with him. However, seeing that Kevin did not respond, Kurt thought that his offer had been rejected, causing his facial expression to gradually turn sour. "Didn't you hear me? As a newcomer around here, you must know your place and listen to me if you want to survive in this city,"
Kurt scolded in a deep voice. Previously, Kevin had humiliated him, Carson Murphy, and Mario Kessler all by himself. However, not only did his father and grandfather not stand up for him, but they also encouraged him to learn a thing or two from Kevin. This made him so angry that he hadn't been in the mood to leave home until finding out that there was a medicinal herb auction today. Given this, he was interested to see if there was anything available that could help improve someone's longevity, and hoped to buy it for his grandfather. But upon seeing Kevin waiting outside behind the security guard, having clearly been turned away at the entrance, the feelings of resentment and injustice in Kurt's heart were once again replaced by arrogance and superiority. In an instant, his waist was no longer sore and his legs no longer hurt when he walked, as if he had completely forgotten about his injuries. Moreover, he was no longer afraid to talk down to Kevin like he had before. Seeing Kurt Eubanks' current behavior, the security guard could immediately tell that the two of them weren't exactly on good terms. He then forcefully shoved Kevin from the side.
"What are you still standing there for? Mr. Eubanks is being kind enough to offer you some guidance, but you're still unwilling to listen to him?"
This shove came so suddenly that Kevin was caught off guard and nearly lost his balance.
"It's all right. I understand that he is not in a good mood right now. You don't have to blame him too much."
Kurt waved his hand gently.
"By the way, do you know how he ended up here?" "Mr. Eubanks, I don't know what kind of dirty tricks this kid had up his sleeve, but for some reason, he was able to charm someone to bring him here. He didn't have a ticket, though."
The security guard recounted his interpretation of what had happened earlier.
"Oh, not bad, Kevin. Looks like you've already learned how to make a living off a wealthy woman,"
Kurt exclaimed loudly in surprise. By now, this commotion had attracted the attention of the surrounding people as they muttered about Kurt's battle with an ant who wasn't even worthy of the time of someone as powerful as Eubanks. Just as Kevin was about to enter the Grand Pharmacy building, the security guard stopped him for not having a ticket. Kevin agreed to wait outside while Olivia went inside to sort things out. Kurt Eubanks arrived at the scene and was happy to give Kevin a hard time for having been turned away at the door. Kurt arrogantly offered some guidance to help him out and loudly teased Kevin for living off some wealthy woman. Their battle attracted the attention of a crowd. After hearing Kurt Eubanks' words, many of those who were lining up outside started to point out and gossip about Kevin. "It's good to see they don't let just anyone into the Grand Pharmacy building. I'm sure a piece of trash like him can't even afford to buy anything from the auction," someone said in disgust.
I'm very curious who he managed to charm to bring him here in the first place. He's not even that good looking. And look at the rags he's wearing."
Another sneered out of jealousy. Hearing all of this silly gossip around him, Kevin was not angry. Back when he was considered a nobody, he had heard way more unpleasant things said about him. Because of this, he had gotten so used to being looked down on to the point that he was no longer bothered by what other people thought of him at all.
"Kevin, why don't you call out the woman who brought you here? I want to see who was foolish enough to have taken a liking to you."
Kurt had a proud smile plastered on his face, and his heart was gloating at the thought of embarrassing Kevin in front of everyone. After he was beaten up by Kevin at the nightclub, he felt so embarrassed by his defeat that he lost all of his confidence. But today, he could finally get his revenge, redeem himself, make all see that Kevin was a useless pretender, and establish the Eubanks family as a dominant force in Washington all at the same time. Before Kevin could say anything, a cold but familiar voice called out, "Kurt, you had better not cause any trouble here tonight. Haven't you learned your lesson yet?" While this didn't sound like a big deal to the others, Kurt's expression suddenly changed as he froze on the spot and slowly turned his head around in a daze. He then saw Olivia Rafferty quickly walking over with an entrance ticket in her hand and accompanied by Mason Zimmerman and a middle-aged man.
"Olivia?"
Kurt swallowed his saliva with great difficulty. After all, the circle of young and rich people from prominent families in Washington wasn't that big, and they all knew each other well. Given this, there were only a handful of people who weren't intimidated by someone like Olivia Rafferty, and Kurt was not one of them. "Kurt, you have quite the nerve to be spreading baseless rumors about me. Kevin Williams is a good friend of mine, and I invited him to come with me. Is there anything wrong with that?" Olivia asked coldly. Mason Zimmerman could not hold in his anger anymore when he heard this. In his eyes, Olivia had always been the love of his life. How could he let other people slander her? Even if it meant also standing up for Kevin in a way, Mason was ready for a fight for Olivia's honor.
"Kurt, I think you're just asking for a beating. Don't you have anything better to do? It seems that you only know how to talk nonsense."
Mason rushed in front of Kurt and confronted him with an angry expression on his face. Seeing this, the onlookers were dumbfounded. After all, Kevin's name had become very famous in Washington, D.C., since winning the championship of the Herbalist Society's recent competition. Since then, he had gained a lot of interest from many high-ranking government officials and wealthy businessmen who were curious to meet him. However, none of them expected that the person they had just mocked was the very same person that they all wanted to befriend.
"Mason, please calm down. Listen to me. This security guard never told me that Olivia was the one who brought Kevin here. Otherwise, even if I had the guts, I wouldn't dare to say anything about her."
Kurt was so scared that he retreated a few steps and pointed at the security guard beside him as he defended himself. No matter how strong the Eubanks family was, Kurt knew that their status couldn't be compared to the Zimmerman family. As such, almost all of Kurt's peers in D.C. would definitely shun him for offending Mason Zimmerman. As Mason's gaze shifted to the security guard, the man's legs seemed to go limp.
"Mr. Zimmerman,
The security guard desperately wanted to defend himself, but he didn't know what to say.
What?"
Mason dared the man to speak as he shoved him in the chest. With Kurt being the young heir of the Eubanks family, Mason naturally wouldn't attack him in public. But both Mason and Kurt knew that there would be an ugly scene in their futures very soon. Unfortunately for the security guard, regardless of whether he was the one who started the incident or not, Kurt had called him out to take the blame as the scapegoat.
"Mr. Zimmerman, please have mercy on me. When I asked that man whether he and Miss Rafferty were together, he didn't refute my assumption. I never thought that it was because he was just friends with her."
The security guard was stumbling over his words as he attempted to explain his actions and present a defense that would cause him to be fired. He kept his head lowered in shame. Despite this, Mason Zimmerman's temper had also risen to the point where he could no longer contain his anger. But just as he was about to deliver another shove to the security guard, the middle-aged man who came out with Olivia tapped him lightly on the shoulder to stop. He then walked up to Kevin and respectfully greeted him. "Hello, Mr. Williams. My name is Harold Smart, and I am the person in charge of the Grand Pharmacy building. I deeply apologize for what happened just now. My security guard didn't know any better and was wrong to have stopped you from entering. Please, don't take it to heart. Had I known that you were coming today, I would have personally welcomed you." Naturally, Harold Smart was not a fool, and he knew that Kevin was the most popular person in Washington right now. With Olivia Rafferty and Mason Zimmerman by his side, he would surely be in big trouble if this matter was not handled properly. "Mr. Smart, you're too polite. I heard that the Grand Pharmacy Building's auction is a highly prestigious event, so I wanted to attend today to broaden my horizons. I wonder if you'll allow me to enter and participate in the auction?" Kevin asked with a faint smile. "Of course you are welcome, Mr. Williams. In fact, as soon as I found out about your arrival, I immediately made arrangements for you to stay in one of our private suites," Harold Smart revealed excitedly. At the same time, he extended his right hand and gestured for Kevin to follow him inside. Accompanied by Olivia, Kevin then quickly walked into the Grand Pharmacy building.
"Mason,
Kurt Eubanks stood frozen on the spot, not knowing what to say.
I will remember what happened today. If you want me to forgive you, it will depend on your actions in the future."
Mason sneered coldly at him. Despite being unsure of what he meant by this, Kurt Eubanks nodded apologetically and promised that it would not happen again. The Grand Pharmacy building had a total of 6 floors, and people were seated between the second and fourth floors. The second and third floors were allocated for ordinary guests, while the fourth floor featured a series of private suites that only the wealthiest and most influential figures were qualified to be in. Although the Smart family was just an ordinary family whose members had never entered the path of becoming experts, who could guarantee that they would never suffer from a serious illness or a life-threatening disease in their lifetime? Therefore, as the leading giant in the pharmaceutical industry, the power that they held and their value to society was immeasurable. Harold Smart personally escorted Kevin to a private suite on the 4th floor, where they could clearly see the situation of the entire auction hall from where they were standing. "Mr. Williams, a lot of rare herbs will be auctioned off later tonight. The selection of refined pills will also be quite extraordinary," Harold made sure to inform him. Kevin was able to become the champion of the Herbalist Society's competition at such a young age. Given his unlimited potential in the future, who wouldn't want to befriend such a talented young man? Harold Smart was named properly. He was going to make sure that Kevin's talents didn't go to any of his rivals. When Kurt Eubanks dared Kevin to call out the woman who had invited him to the auction, he was shocked to find out it was Olivia Rafferty. After being threatened by Mason Zimmerman, Kurt tried to use the security guard as a scapegoat. But before things could get out of hand, the person in charge, Harold Smart, stepped in and apologized to Kevin for the incident. Aware of Kevin's current popularity in the capital, Harold praised Kevin and made sure to inform him that there would be a lot of rare herbs and pills up for auction later that night. Kevin simply nodded his head in response to what Harold Smart said. Kevin's focus would normally have been on the rare herbs, but his motivations had changed now that he saw the pharmaceutical industry as a way to gain greater fortune and greater influence, not just in Washington and Chicago, but far beyond the reaches of those cities. Besides, his situation was different from that of other herbalists. After all, the secret book, which contained a large variety of pill formulas, was in his possession. So as long as his strength was sufficient, he could still refine medicinal pills at any time if he needed them. Moreover, the most urgent matter at hand for him was increasing his power base to the highest level possible. In order to achieve this, he had to focus on building a solid foundation in DC so that he could enter the upper realm as soon as possible. When you went inside earlier, did you see the heads of the Smart and Bates families? Kevin glanced at Olivia Rafferty and asked with an indifferent expression. Olivia, who was leisurely sitting on a sofa in the suite, smiled at him and replied, "The Smart and Bates families are two of the three giants in the pharmaceutical industry. If you have nothing to do with them at the moment, then why would they come to see you?" "Then we came here for nothing?" Kevin asked with a gloomy face. "Look at you. What are you so upset about?" Olivia rolled her eyes at him and explained, "The auction in the Grand Pharmacy building is different from ordinary auctions. It is not only money that can buy herbs. Similar to the Herbalist Society's internal market, you can also use medicinal formulas or pill formulas of equivalent value in exchange for what you want." "Are you saying that I should use that to my advantage and draw enough attention to myself that they will have to take notice? In other words, as long as I put on a show that would impress them, they will be the ones to come and find me?" Kevin asked, suddenly enlightened. "I am simply sharing the mechanics of the auction with you. As for how you go about it, your strategy shall depend entirely on you." Olivia suddenly got up and moved to another sofa in front of her. This way, she could have a much better view of the upcoming auction through the window. After some time had passed, the Grand Pharmacy building's host finally announced that the auction had officially begun. "Ladies and gentlemen, the first medicinal herb up for auction is a 500-year-old Golden Heart Lotus seed. The starting bid will be at $3 million. As his voice fell, the curtain on the stage was suddenly pulled open, and a lotus seed the size of an adult's heart appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It was entirely black in color with golden threads circulating around it. However, for those in the audience who knew nothing about rare herbs and were only here to watch the show, this lotus seed did not attract their attention. What was strange was that, for such a precious, inexpensive medicinal herb, the auction's organizers did not allow those who knew what it was to take a closer look. $4 million! Olivia suddenly pressed the button on the table to place her bid. "What are you doing?" Kevin wanted to stop her, but it was too late. "Of course I'm buying something. Since no one else seems to be willing to bid for it so far, wouldn't the chances of me winning be very high?" Olivia flashed a proud smile. "Do you really think that's a good thing?" Kevin glanced at her, then narrowed his eyes and looked back at the lotus seed on the stage. "What do you mean?" Olivia suddenly asked with a slight frown. The host didn't lie. That Golden Heart Lotus seed seems to really be 500 years old. However, he did not mention that although it is a very special herb, it is not suitable for use in refining medicinal pills on its own. Every 50 years, its outermost layer secretes a strange poison that only the stamen of the emerald glazed flower can cure. But the prerequisite is that both herbs must be of the same age. Kevin stood at the window and explained unhurriedly. Nowadays, medicinal herbs that have been around for hundreds of years are very rare, so you probably just wasted $4 million on something you'll never be able to use. Olivia's eyes immediately widened when she heard this, and she almost jumped up from the sofa. "How can they do this? It's so unfair!" Olivia roared angrily. At the end of the day, this auction is a business. They only care about their own interest in increasing their bottom line. Kevin shook his head and pointed to the stage. "Just watch. No one will bid higher than you." Indeed, as Kevin said, no matter how much the host tried to liven the atmosphere and praise the benefits of the Golden Heart Lotus seed, no one else made a bid. Like Kevin, those who knew about the Golden Heart Lotus seed knew that it was useless without the emerald glazed flower. At the same time, those who weren't familiar with it didn't dare to bid on something that they couldn't afford and that they didn't know how to use. Moreover, these people knew that since there was no one else who wanted it, clearly there was something wrong with it. So instead of taking a complete risk, they should reserve their funds to bid for an item they felt better about later on.
$4 million, going once, going twice, sold to Miss Olivia Rafferty,
the host loudly announced before moving on to the next item.
The second item up for auction is the Snowwater Mountain Herb. The starting bid will be at $6 million.
This, on the other hand, attracted Kevin's attention. He had read about it in the secret book before, but he never managed to come across one until now. The Snowwater Mountain Herb was said to only appear on the cliffs of some of the highest mountains in the world. Externally applying its juice to the skin could strengthen the bones of a person's limbs to the point that they were seemingly like metal. On the other hand, consuming it could heal any form of damage to one's internal organs. In both cases, this herb would be absolutely useful to prolonging one's life, whether they were ordinary people or experts. Aside from this, it could still be used to concoct the poison protection pill, which could protect someone from being infected by any type of poison for up to 50 years. On top of it all, the most important thing was that the Snowwater Mountain Herb's side effects were very mild. So even an ordinary person who was already 70 or 80 years old could safely consume it without any worries. Maybe I can give this to my parents, Kevin thought to himself. However, due to high demand, the current bidding price had already increased from $6 to $64 million in a very short period of time. $70 million. Kevin pressed his button without hesitation. While such a large sum of money was definitely considered astronomically out of reach for the average person, everyone who was present at the auction wouldn't bat an eye at this number. This was because the room was full of people like Olivia Rafferty, Kurt Eubanks, and other outrageously wealthy individuals. Besides, if this herb could truly prolong one's life, who among these wealthy and influential people would complain about having to spend $70 million for it? Given this, almost none of these people were deterred even as the bidding price continued to rise. In just a short minute, it had already reached more than $100 million. Yet many people were still scrambling to bid for more. Faced with such a scene, the host secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The previous situation where the golden hard lotus seed did not interest anyone had really given him a fright earlier. After all, the people behind the auction had placed such high hopes on that item. Fortunately, it seemed that the eventual winning bid for the Snowwater Mountain Herb would be more than enough to recuperate any potential losses. $300 million. Kevin loudly announced the current price that he was willing to pay as he pressed his button. This suddenly shocked many of the others who had been actively bidding. Even among these wealthy people, once the current price was over $100 million, it would start to make them think twice before bidding. After all, it was not a joke to just casually shell out a couple $100 million. Given the unpredictable and complicated nature of things, no one could guarantee that at a time of crisis, even a family with over $100 million in emergency savings would be able to turn their situation around. Because of this, many of the guests present calmed down for a moment. They couldn't afford to be this reckless. Watching from the private suite, Kevin revealed a proud smile, thinking that he had successfully beaten everyone else for the Snowwater Mountain Herb. Just then, a cold voice suddenly sounded. $310 million. Such a huge jump in price left everyone else speechless. Looking at Mason Zimmerman, who was casually leaning back in his seat, the host couldn't help but flash a huge smile.
Mr. Mason Zimmerman has just set the current bid at $310 million. Is there anyone else who's willing to raise a higher bid?
The host announced excitedly. $350 million. Kevin pressed his button again with a gloomy face. This immediately attracted a lot of discussions amongst the crowd. $400 million. Mason shouted as he seemed determined to obtain the Snowwater Mountain Herb. However, before anyone else could react this time, Kevin pressed his button and bid $500 million. Everyone on the scene frowned subconsciously at this. They could see that these two final bidders were evenly matched. However, Mason Zimmerman and the other guests knew each other quite well. After all, the Zimmerman family was quite famous in Washington, D.C. But who was the mysterious man in the private suite that could seemingly go toe-to-toe with Mason? The audience was on the edge of their seats as they waited to see if this powerful stranger would outbid Mason Zimmerman, whose fortune was known to be almost limitless. Soon after Kevin was admitted to the Grand Pharmacy building, the second item came up for auction. Kevin realized that it was the Snow-Water Mountain herb that could be used to protect his parents from being poisoned. When the auction began, Kevin, who was hidden from view to the rest of the bidding public, got into a bidding war with Mason Zimmerman. Everyone was shocked and curious about the identity of the individual who was able to go toe-to-toe with Mason. The unknown has always been the scariest thing, especially in places like Washington where big shots are everywhere. Even a seemingly tiny action had to be carefully considered over and over again. Otherwise, you would never know where your enemies lay. At first, everyone thought it was probably just a young heir of a wealthy family who had come out to spend some of his parents' money. But now, they realized that this guy was probably not an ordinary rich young kid. However, there were only a few big shots in Washington who could come to the Grand Pharmacy building. Such blind bidding was really not the way that things were usually done.
Seriously? What a huge sum of money. Since you're so eager to get your hands on this, I'll just have to give it up as a favor.
Mason Zimmerman tidied his clothes and smiled faintly. In the beginning, he had acted as if he was determined to get it, but now he suddenly was willing to let it go. This change of pace was too sudden, and Kevin wasn't the only one who was confused by Mason's motives. However, some people could still only think of one thing. Mason Zimmerman's previous actions had been deliberate. What he really wanted to do was raise the price. Although the herb could prolong one's life, no one could guarantee how effective it would be. Under the circumstances of not knowing the exact effect of the medicinal herb, some things were indeed not worth it. "Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman, for giving it to me," Kevin said coldly through the microphone, but his face turned gloomy. "Mason is really too much. He actually made you spend so much money for nothing." Olivia stood off to the side and said angrily with her arms crossed in front of her. Mason Zimmerman raised his head proudly and looked up at the private room. He thought to himself, "Kevin, so what if you won the championship? Do you want to go up against me? You are still too experienced."
Mason, you are really amazing. You were able to bleed Kevin dry so easily. That's enough money for this punk to really suffer.
Kurt Eubank sat beside Mason Zimmerman with a flattering smile on his face. Then he half-bent his body and stroked Mason's ego.
Who does Kevin think he is? I just didn't put him anywhere near my level earlier. As long as I want to take care of him, it will be a piece of cake,"
Mason Zimmerman said complacently. The auction continued. What happened earlier was just a small interlude. It was just that everyone was waiting for one thing. More than 10 auction items had passed. The person who had bid big on the second item in the private room didn't make a sound.
"Everyone, the next item is the last item to be auctioned. It is the Lovesick Bamboo Flower. The starting price is $1.
As the host's voice fell, the Lovesick Bamboo Flower in the transparent glass box was slowly pushed forward by the staff. The emerald green stem seemed to be carved out of jade. 5 flowers bloomed at the end of a leaf, and each flower had 8 colors. Kevin's pupil shrank when he saw this auction item. He could not help but tense up. "Wow," Kevin muttered under his breath. He used a lot of strength to suppress his shock. "What exactly is it?" Olivia Rafferty asked in confusion. In fact, it was not just her. Many people in the audience did not know what the Lovesick Bamboo Flower was. It just looked strange. Those who did not understand it felt that if it was really so powerful, why was the starting price just $1? However, they didn't doubt that there was any kind of problem with this item. After all, the Grand Pharmacy Building had been established for a very long time, and they had sold countless valuable medicinal herbs. There had never been any problems with counterfeit products. Therefore, those who were knowledgeable kept calming their hearts and seriously considering what price they should offer for the lovesick bamboo flower. No one took the initiative to bid, as if they were waiting for someone else to make the first offer. Of course, there was no lack of people who wanted to buy it, but they only needed to lock onto the tracks of the bidders. $25 million. Kevin broke the silence first and immediately bid $25 million. Would the crowd be shocked by such a bold bid? In an instant, the price had gone from $1 to $25 million. Still, many of those present felt that this was unreasonable. "Kevin, you're crazy. How could this flower possibly be worth that much?" Olivia quickly said. She was one of the few who didn't realize the flower's worth and was shocked by Kevin's leap into the bidding. "You do not know the value of this thing," Kevin replied without even turning his head. His eyes were filled with burning greed. He understood the medicinal effects of the lovesick bamboo flower better than anyone. This was one of the two most indispensable medicinal ingredients in refining the golden pill. Under normal circumstances, not only was every growth of the lovesick bamboo flower extremely harsh on the environment, but it also required at least 300 years. Kevin had previously learned from the Night King that the age of the lovesick bamboo flower determined its medicinal properties. As a result, the effect of the golden pill was even stronger. Furthermore, Kevin didn't want to use it to concoct just any golden pill. Instead, he wanted to concoct an even stronger version. As long as he could successfully refine it, his power base would soar to astronomical levels. $30 million. Mason Zimmerman immediately raised the price tag in his hand. Although he didn't know what the effect of the lovesick bamboo flower was, since Kevin was in such a hurry to bid, he couldn't let him succeed so easily.
$35 million.
Another voice yelled out. Everyone looked up at the highest room. Everyone knew who the person inside was. Almost instantly, many people who wanted to bid put down the plates in their hands hesitantly. $35 million. Is there anyone else who wants to bid higher? The host asked loudly. $35 million going once, $35 million going twice, $35 million going 3 times. Just as the host was about to hammer, the red light outside Kevin's room suddenly lit up. The host's hand, which was suspended in the air, immediately stopped. "May I ask what the VIP in the private room number 4 will bid?" The window of the private room slowly opened, and Kevin looked down at the people below with his eyes lowered. "May I ask what this gentleman would like to bid? Or perhaps something to exchange?" the host asked with a smile. However, he did not believe that Kevin could possibly take out something worth $35 million. "I have a pill here. I wonder if there are any professionals who can judge its value." As Kevin spoke, he took out a crimson pill from his pocket. Hearing this, many people had sneers on their faces. Although medicinal pills had become more and more precious over the years, especially high-grade medicinal pills, which were even rarer, there had never been a pill that cost more than $35 million in Washington, D.C. "May I ask what grade of medicinal pill you have taken out? What effect does it have?" the host continued to ask politely. "It's a top grade 8 pill, the Great 5 Elemental pill." Kevin raised his head slightly and said with a voice full of energy. After these words left his mouth, the entire audience fell into silence. It wasn't that they didn't hear what he said. Wasn't the Herbalist Society competition won because of this pill? Most of the people present had never seen Kevin in person before, but the fact that he could produce such a pill indicated that he was indeed the champion of the competition. The host's face was filled with shock. He had heard that there was a distinguished guest here today, so he had to take care of him. "May I ask if the gentleman is the champion of the Herbalist Society competition, Kevin Williams?" The host asked it carefully. "That's right." Kevin did not want to hide it. After all, he had every intention of stirring up trouble in Washington in the future. It was not a bad thing to have more people know him. "He's Kevin Williams? I didn't realize he was so young," someone whispered.
That's right, it's really him. I watched the live broadcast of the competition that day,
Someone else replied.
"I didn't expect to see him in person here today,"
The first person said. Mason Zimmerman clenched his fist tightly as he listened to the discussions of the people around him. If it wasn't for Kevin, these sighs of admiration and reverence would have all been his. "I wonder if this Great 5 Elemental pill of mine is worth $35 million, Kevin asked confidently. "Please wait a moment, Mr. Williams. We need to discuss this matter." The host quickly arranged for a group of people to gather around. Kevin did not object. He closed the window and sat back down on the sofa in the private room. His face was filled with a pleased smile. Of course, the ultimate goal of his taking out the Great 5 Elemental pill was to attract the Smart family's higher-ups to come forward. Kevin had wisely used the auction to establish his name as a valuable part of the pharmaceutical industry. He was one step closer to achieving the upper realm. Kevin shocked the auction audience by bidding for the secretly valuable lovesick bamboo flower, which is used to make the golden pill. He then offered to pay for it by using his own Great 5 Elemental pill, which he made to win the Herbalist Society's competition. Producing the Great 5 Elemental pill revealed to all Kevin's identity as the contest winner, and also had him making his value known to the Smart family. Since the Smart family was the largest and most powerful of the three great medical families in Washington, D.C., Kevin knew they were a force to be reckoned with. Kevin still didn't know what kind of danger he would face in the future. Although the Radiance's current strength was not bad, the forces in Washington, D.C. alone were overwhelming. Perhaps those people who joined the Radiance initially only wanted to obtain the benefits of the pills to improve their own power bases, so there was nothing to tell how it would develop in the future. Kevin had never thought of himself as a savior, but ever since he had founded the Radiance, he knew he would have to invest heavily if he wanted to expand his power. Of course, he knew that a complete power must have reliable logistical support. Although Kevin had a large number of pill recipes in his hands, he didn't have enough herbs to refine all of the pills one by one. In addition, high-grade pills not only required extremely valuable herbs, but also had a very high chance of failure at any given time. Secretly, Kevin didn't have full confidence that he could personally refine the pills in bulk, even if he had the time to do so. At most, he could refine 2 pills in case of emergencies. In this sense, ordinary medical personnel were exceptionally important. The Smart family had already reached the point where their skills had advanced to incredible levels. However, this was only from the perspective of the overall situation. Selfishly, Kevin needed the people of the Radiance to create as much value for him as possible. Just as he was thinking about this, a series of rapid footsteps approached from afar. In less than a few seconds, the door of the room was pushed open from the outside. The person in the lead was about 40 years old. He was tall and slender, and his entire body exuded a mature and steady aura. After entering the room, the 5 or 6 people behind him immediately retreated and locked the door behind him. "Mr. Williams, I've heard a lot about you recently. You are indeed something of a young hero around here these days." The person was humble and polite. He spoke with a moderate tone of praise. "Thank you for the compliment. And may I ask who you are?" Kevin asked with a faint smile. "I am Alexander Smart," the newcomer answered bluntly. "Alexander Smart is basically the second in command of the Smart family. He is a famous doctor here in D.C. when it comes to treating difficult and complicated diseases." Olivia reminded him in a whispered voice. Kevin heard her and took a deep look at Alexander Smart with a smile. He could clearly feel the energy of Alexander's power base. But the strange thing was that Kevin could not sense his power base in detail. This made him frown slightly. With his own power base, there were only two possibilities that could explain his inability to sense Alexander's power base. The first was that Alexander had used a strange technique to conceal his power base, and the second was that this man's power base was even higher than his own. Therefore, Kevin became even more polite. He stretched out his hand and invited Alexander Smart to sit down on the sofa with him. I heard that you're interested in the lovesick bamboo flower. You even took out the grade 5 elemental pill to exchange for it? This is the pill that you refined during the Herbalist Society's competition. Is that right? Alexander Smart went straight to the point. That's right, Kevin said immediately. He didn't try to hide his thoughts. But I heard someone else offered $35 million to buy the lovesick bamboo flower. Do you think your pill is worth more than that? Alexander Smart pushed the glasses on his nose up further and asked. However, his meaning was very obvious. It was impossible to get the lovesick bamboo flower with just a pill, but he did not mind Kevin giving him more. Kevin frowned when he heard him. Mr. Smart, do you take me for a fool? He asked. Haha, Mr. Williams, you must be joking. I know you are a high-level herbalist, but there is a situation that you may not know about. Alexander Smart said faintly. I am all ears. I would like to hear the details, Kevin said as he leaned back. I know that you are from the Midwest, Chicago, right? There was an auction where useless pills were sold at sky-high prices, but you should know that this place is different. This will affect the price of the items. To put it bluntly, people are stupid and have a lot of money. But Washington, D.C. is different. The headquarters of the Herbalist Society is located here. Every year, countless pills are sold. Ordinary people can be cured by using medicinal pills when they are sick. Hence, even though high-grade medicinal pills are rare, the price cannot be driven too high. Alexander Smart patiently explained. That's why the grade 5 elemental pill in your hands is the highest of the 8 grades. Perhaps you would be willing to take out another 2 formulas, then refine 5 high-grade pills for my family. This way there will be room for discussion, he added. When Olivia heard these words, her eyes nearly popped out. Kevin also laughed involuntarily. Alexander Smart was no longer asking for an exorbitant price, but he was actually taking advantage of the situation. 2 Tier 8 pill formulas, 1 Tier 8 medicinal pill, and 5 high-grade medicinal pills? Did Alexander Smart really think of Kevin as a fool? He wanted him to refine pills for the Smart family for free? Although the lovesick bamboo flower was rare and precious, it wasn't worth such a sky-high price. Aren't these terms a bit too harsh? Kevin asked with a laugh. I wouldn't say that. Surely you must be aware of the medicinal effects of the lovesick bamboo flower. The possibility of being able to prolong one's life is rarely seen in this world. Moreover, as long as one is alive, isn't it possible to retrieve anything that has been lost? Alexander Smart said with profound meaning. Do you know how difficult it is to extract the lovesick bamboo flower? Kevin asked without waiting for Alexander to continue. Kevin added, one needs a very rare power base to be able to do so. Furthermore, there are 5 flowers on the stage. At most, you can only refine 1 pill. In other words, Mr. Smart, you and I are both businessmen. No one wants to take a loss. Since I sincerely want it, you can give me a price with sincerity. But how about we do business with each other honestly? At that moment, Olivia was so shocked that she could not speak. She blankly turned her head to look at the lovesick bamboo flower on the stage. Until now, she could not figure out why exactly it was so valuable. Now she realized that not only was it expensive, but even the refining requirements were incredibly stringent. It seems like you're reluctant to part with the pill formula and the pills. Since this is the case, there is no need to continue this transaction. A cold light flashed across Alexander Smart's eyes. He got up, tidied his clothes, and was about to turn around and leave. What a pity. The good stuff is right in front of me, but I am not a wealthy person. It seems that my lovesick bamboo flower has no fate. Kevin stretched his body as he spoke and turned to look at Olivia. I guess it would be better to go back as soon as possible. Before Olivia Rafferty could reply, Alexander Smart, who had walked to the door, stopped. He turned to look at Kevin and said with some anger, Mr. Williams, you are a businessman. Don't you understand the principle of bargaining? You should at least give me a price. Don't shut down the deal altogether. It's not that I don't want to bargain, but the price is really just too high. I really can't afford it, Kevin said with a deep smile. Okay, I don't want those 2-tier 8-pill formulas anymore. Are you willing to refine 5 high-grade medicinal pills for me? Can we provide the medicinal ingredients in pill formulas? Alexander said as he clenched his fist tightly. He thought that he was an expert in business, but he did not expect to encounter someone like Kevin. 3, Kevin countered, pressing the price down again. He was not afraid that Alexander Smart would not agree. The moment the other party introduced himself, all of this fell into his calculations. If the Smart family really didn't care about the Grade 5 elemental pill, how could they let Alexander Smart come forward? The reason why they said so much nonsense earlier was just to try to squeeze more out of the deal. On the contrary, Alexander Smart initially thought that Kevin was determined to get the lovesick bamboo flower, which was why he wanted to take advantage of the situation. Kevin had already made a name for himself in the Herbalist Society competition. Who wouldn't want to befriend a young genius? Moreover, the Smart family currently needed a few high-grade medicinal pills to save them. Due to some conflicts in recent years, if they could not find help from the Herbalist Society, Kevin had become their best candidate. When the two of them reached an agreement, the lovesick bamboo flower naturally fell into Kevin's hands. When the staff of the Grand Pharmacy building sent the item over, Kevin's eyes were filled with amazement when he noticed the flower emitting a strange fragrance in front of him. Alexander Smart also stared at the lovesick bamboo flower. Just like what he said, who could dislike something that could prolong one's life? However, the Smart family really didn't have the ability to refine it. Adding on the fact that the Smart family needed the help of an expert, that was why they brought it up for auction. Doing business was fake. Finding a suitable person to help was the real deal. Since the auction has ended, we won't be staying for long, Kevin said as he put away the lovesick bamboo flower and was about to leave. We will prepare the medicinal formula in 3 days. I hope you can come then. Alexander Smart did not forget to remind him. I will never go back on my promise. After saying this, Kevin left with Olivia. After the two of them left, a figure appeared beside Alexander Smart like a ghost.
Did you really let him pull it away so easily?
The person said as he lowered his head respectfully. It's already his. How can we do anything illegal? Alexander's facial expression darkened. He looked at the Grade 5 elemental pill in his hand. Suddenly he revealed a cold smile. But even if I let him go, there are still some people who won't let him leave so easily. This is a good opportunity for me to see just how capable he really is.
Do you need me to take a look?
The Black Shadow asked. That would be good. The smile on Alexander Smart's face became thicker and thicker. The Black Shadow beside him disappeared like a ghost again. After Kevin offered up the Grade 5 elemental pill in exchange for the lovesick bamboo flower, Alexander Smart arrived at his private room where he tried to broker a deal. The two of them finally came to an agreement and the lovesick bamboo flower was brought to Kevin in exchange for him refining some pills for Alexander. After Kevin left, a mysterious figure appeared beside Alexander to question whether he gave away the lovesick bamboo flower too easily. After leaving the private room, Kevin did not stay at the Grand Pharmacy building any longer. He escorted Olivia out of the building with confident strides. A man who was not guilty of having a treasure would become a criminal. In the face of the temptation of being able to live for a dramatically longer period of time, very few people were able to maintain their true feelings. There was no such thing as seizing the treasure by force inside the Grand Pharmacy building. However, it didn't mean that it couldn't happen after walking out of the door. The people who had come tonight were all important figures. There were a lot of things that didn't require them to personally take action. Even if the people they sent failed, they still had countless ways to get rid of themselves. It took nothing more than pushing 2 scapegoats out. This kind of thing was simply too common. "Are you worried that someone will hurt us?" Olivia asked as soon as she got into the car. "That's right. The lovesick bamboo flower and the water immortal jade skin juice are both extraordinarily rare herbs. Given everything that happened at the auction, many people now know that we have something worth an incredible amount of money in our possession right now. We can't assume that no one will have evil intentions." Kevin started the car and quickly left the parking garage of the Grand Pharmacy building. Almost at the same time, many people gave the same order to their subordinates. "Kevin, I hope you don't disappoint me." Alexander Smart, who had arrived at the top floor of the building, looked down from the balcony at the car Kevin was driving. He flicked the cigarette ash in his hand and watched it drift through the air below him. The Grand Pharmacy building was located in the center of the city. As he drove, Kevin didn't find anything unusual along the way. However, the quieter it was, the more uneasy he felt. This was the calm before the storm. Although he truly wasn't afraid of anyone plotting against him, it didn't mean that Olivia wasn't afraid. The two of them weren't on the same level. Furthermore, if something were to happen to her, Kevin wouldn't be able to explain it to her father or the rest of her family. At the same time, in Chicago, Dalton Steele was driving the car steadily. Rachel and Lily were sitting in the backseat of the car and chatting with each other. Ever since Kevin made the call, Dalton had been following Lily everywhere. Because the Williams Company had a board meeting that night, they had not returned to the apartment yet. "Lily, what do you think about the Williams family?" Rachel put down her phone and asked softly. After Thomas Williams found Lily, the Williams family took the initiative to start a multifaceted cooperative relationship between her and the Williams Company. Although the Williams Company used to be a property under the name of the Williams family, ever since Kevin took control of it, neither party had interacted much with the other. Now that they had started to work together again, there was no doubt that they had some thoughts that could not be put on the table. "The Williams family asked for 51% of the total shares in the company. Obviously, they did not treat us as their partners. The benefits that would come to our shareholders would be astronomical. Many people in the company are asking me to agree to their terms." Lily gently rubbed her forehead and said, "But once you agree, it means that the Williams family can once again have control of the company. If Kevin becomes hostile with them in the future, the company will not be able to protect him anymore," Rachel said. To be honest, Lily was also very irritated about the matter. Not only was her reputation not as strong as Kevin's, but now she had found herself in this lose-lose situation. "Why don't we call Kevin and discuss it?" Rachel kindly suggested. "Now isn't the time for that. Maybe after the board meeting when we have a better sense of how likely all of this is. He has been really busy in Washington recently. He just won the championship of the Herbalist Society."
"Be careful."
Before Lily could finish speaking, Dalton shouted loudly. He suddenly stepped on the brakes. The friction between the tires and the road produced an ear-piercing sound and left 2 long marks on the ground. Not far away, a large truck was parked in the middle of the road, completely blocking the road. "Why would they stop right there?" Rachel asked as she rubbed her forehead, which had slammed into the seat in front of her when they stopped short.
"They're not moving."
Dalton frowned and said with a serious expression,
"You two stay in the car. I'll go over and take a look."
Dalton seemed to have thought of something when he got out of the car. He took out 2 pistols from his waistband and handed them to the 2 women.
"They're loaded. Each gun has 6 bullets. They are for you to protect yourselves. If anything happens, don't worry about me. Just get yourself somewhere safe,"
Dalton told them seriously. After looking around, Dalton carefully moved toward the large truck and kept an eye on the situation of the 2 women behind him, so that in case of any danger, he could rush over at any time. Just as Dalton walked to the middle of the 2 vehicles, a sense of doom arose from the bottom of his heart. 2 piercingly cold bursts of energy suddenly came from both sides. Dalton jumped, spinning in the air. When the bursts of energy hit the trees on either side of him, they immediately split the trunks of the trees into pieces.
"You actually dare to come to Chicago?"
Dalton said as he landed steadily on the ground. His pupils violently contracted to the size of a needle tip. As Dalton Steele's voice fell, 4 figures quickly jumped out from the darkness. One of them was Officer Emmett, whom he had met with Lily not long ago. Next to her was Renee Silver.
"You people of the Union don't know when to quit,"
Dalton said. His expression was extremely serious. He quickly scanned the people coming toward him. "Kevin needs to pay for what he's done. No one has ever humiliated our union like this before. If we don't make an example of him, how will our reputation be preserved?" Renee Silver roared with a cold tone.
If you have the ability, go to Washington, D.C. and find him then. Why are you pretending to be so tough here in Chicago?"
Dalton replied with disdain. "You are Kevin's right-hand man and also an accomplice. Killing you will not only make Kevin's heart ache, but also eliminate a great threat from the world. Besides, you are not our only target tonight." Renee quickly ordered the few people beside her. "I will take care of him. Quickly take Kevin's wife away." Officer Emmett, who was the leader of the others, nodded. She turned around and quickly moved toward the car where Lily and Rachel were.
"Don't you dare!"
Dalton Steele shouted, and the fusion hammer suddenly appeared in his hands. "It's already difficult enough for you to protect yourself, yet you still want to save someone else?" Renee said as she swung the cold sword in her hand toward Dalton. Meanwhile, Kevin was on a street in Washington, D.C. where there were few people, but this was the only way back to the Rafferty family's mansion. Kevin steadily stopped the car, waiting for the traffic light to turn green. "Are you worried?" Olivia, who was sitting in the passenger seat, asked as she looked at the quiet street outside her window. "Look behind us." Kevin narrowed his eyes and said faintly. Olivia looked back when she heard him. 2 black cars had appeared behind them at some point in time. There were also 2 large trucks stopped in front of them, one on the left and one on the right. Even though they both had a green light, neither of them moved. "Why aren't they moving?" Olivia asked in confusion. "They're waiting for us," Kevin answered expressionlessly. "When I drive into the middle of the intersection, they'll charge in recklessly. We'll be crushed." "What did you say?" Olivia exclaimed as she covered her mouth. "Looks like there are many people who want the lovesick bamboo flower," Kevin muttered as he stared at the red and green lights changing. When the red light in front of them turned green, he suddenly stepped on the accelerator, and the trucks also started moving. But when they drove forward, Kevin's car stayed where it was and did not move. He could only hear the sound of screeching tires. The car behind him also thought that Kevin was about to start moving. He stepped on the accelerator and crashed into the back of them. The trunk of the car caved in quite a bit. A few seconds later, the vehicle that Kevin and Olivia were in was knocked on its side, then kept rolling on the ground. Finally, it exploded and turned into a ball of fire in the night sky. Under such circumstances, not many people would be able to survive. Seeing this, the people in the trucks quickly got out. It was not just a couple of drivers. There were more than 20 of them. A few of them quickly walked to the burning vehicle and checked it carefully. One of them reported loudly,
"There's no one in the vehicle."
"How is that possible?"
They didn't even have time to jump onto the car in such a short amount of time. How could they have escaped?
The leader's expression changed drastically as he roared in disbelief. It was as if he was asking the people around him as well as himself. No one dared to answer. The street was quiet, and only the sound of the car burning could be heard. Your ambush was very good, but unfortunately you didn't calculate the difference in strength between us. Kevin's voice suddenly sounded. Everyone on the scene was stunned. However, this was obviously not the first time that these people had encountered such a thing. They quickly reacted. They gathered in groups of 3 or 4 with their backs against each other and took out their own weapons. They looked around vigilantly. Suddenly, not far from where the car had been hit, Kevin and a very pale-looking Olivia appeared in front of everyone's eyes. No one would have believed it to be possible, but the fiery crash had burned up an empty car. Both Kevin and Olivia were safe.